Does every man have men around him that he can rely on, that he can trust?
The men are going to tell you the ugly truth. The whole iron sharpens iron concept.
It's a place where men can be of service to one another. That's distinctly different than support.
Once the concept is introduced to them, something in them wakes up.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself, and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up, because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior, and on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nicky Ballou, and we're doing something a little different today. We got a podcaster panel here featuring some fucking great men. Arpa, Banks, and Cooper, A, B, C. Welcome, men.
I never realized it was ABC like that, Definitely.
You're the master podcaster. He figures all this out.
The heavy hitters of Sovereign Man, right?
So, men, we're going to have a conversation today, really. But what we want to talk about today is, what's a fucking men's group? Why should a men's group exist? Why should a man be part of a men's group? And how can you ensure, if you're running a men's group, that men's group is delivering the goods for the men that are members of it? So in no particular order, why don't you start chiming in on this? And why don't we start with Cooper, the C of ABC?
Let's go one question at a time, though. What was the first?
All right,
one?
what's a fucking men's group, Coop?
What's a men's group?
So I always like to tell the story of how I met Ballou. It was that Raymond Ayer was my publisher, and I had launched my book, and he comes up to me, congratulates me on the book, and then he says, do you have men in your life, Cooper? And I says, not really. He says, would you like to get some? I says, yes. He says, okay, here's the date and time of our next meeting, come. That was 6.5 years ago. And that to me is the epitome of it. Does any man, or does every man have men around him that he can rely on, that he can trust, that when he has issues in his life, that he can talk to them in a confidential way to get suggestions, help, support, whatever it is he needs. And I can say that I wish I had been in a men's group far beyond when I joined as I did.
So far sooner. You mean you wish you would have joined?
Far sooner, yes.
Far sooner.
Far sooner.
6.5
far earlier in my life.
Right. Yeah. That's a good, succinct definition of what it is. And
can I add to that? Can I add to that?
By all means.
So I think the part that Cooper has left out is in a men's group, we're not there to fluff each other's nuts. Empathy is one thing, but it can be, in today's world, it can be done to detriment, right? So in a men's group, the men are going to tell you the ugly truth, right? We're talking the whole iron sharpens iron concept, and sometimes a man needs to even be told, what's the lie he's telling himself, so he can see what the truth is, and then make an educated decision and be put into action rather than just shit talk, into a future that's better for him and family. You know what I'm saying? Banks is shaking his head. Banks, I know you kind of concur. What am I missing?
Well, I mean, from the what perspective? To me, I've always looked at it as a place where men can be of service to one another. And that's distinctly different than support. We all know that one. But that's not what men need. They can stand on their own fucking 2 feet, or they ought to learn how to by being in relationship with other men. So it's not about support at all. Let's remove that. It's not a support group. It is a place where a man can get help if he asks for the help that he needs. That's him taking some ownership over where he does need assistance. But more so at a higher level, where I see it always serving for a man, is that it's actually providing him a place to be of service again. Because to me, it's bringing men back to the level of looking beyond their own basic needs, getting emotional or mental support, and actually standing in a group dynamic again, a social culture. a place that brings men into uniformity, some sort of a place where they're allowed to actually explore who they can be and what they can affect in the world. And that is very different layers. It's not support. It is not help. It is stepping into another level of being of service. And that means, to me, it's not about telling a man what I want to hear or expecting to be told what I want to hear. It's getting down to the truth. That's where service lies to me. I've been given a lot of support in my life personally. That was a lot of fluff.
Yeah.
It was people who bought my excuses.
Mm-hmm.
They did not challenge me.
It's very interesting because a lot of men hear about groups and they get excited because I think it's a missing. I think most men don't even realize that they've been craving masculine-only spaces. You remember Dr. Robert Glover when he came and he spoke to us a couple years back? He said to us, men have been craving masculine-only spaces and they didn't even know it, right?
Well, how would they know it if they were exposed to it, right?
So they didn't even know it. But once the concept is introduced to them, something in them wakes up. The problem is that men have become so feminized that they don't understand what a masculine-only space is supposed to be like. They think that it ought to be a little bit like that feminized world that they're already a part of. And that feminized world is all about, as you said, Arpa, so elegantly, fluffing your nuts, right? And it's all about, as Banks, you said, help, support. You know, there was a man who was part of the men's work that we all grew up in. His name was Van Maris, the Van Man, we called him. And he used to say, support is for tits, not for men, right? And I just thought that was absolutely brilliant and true. I think a reason to be a part of a men's group is to constantly and consistently be challenged on the personal standards you're maintaining in your life. Are your standards elevating you or are they having you sink back? What are your men's thoughts on that?
I would have potentially said it more around goals, keeping goals in the forefront and achieving them. And the men pushing you to not believe your own bullshit and where you are falling down or, operating at a 5 or 6 instead of a 10, the men are going to call you on it, which helps elevate your game.
You see, it's interesting that you say goals, and I think goals are important, but goal achievement, I think, is a function of consistent effort, and consistent effort is a function of how high your standards are. Because there's a bunch of men who have lofty goals, and yet they don't seem to achieve them. There's a man that's in our community, and he's a nice guy, and he has these lofty goals of entrepreneurial success for himself. And yet his effort is minimal. He's come and he's revealed to all of us what his effort has been. He's made big commitments and not followed through on them. And the reason is because he doesn't have a standard that I'll do what I say. That's not a standard for him. My minimum acceptable standard of behavior is if I say X, I'll do X. And I think that's why he's not achieving his goals. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, Coop.
I would agree. I mean, you can set goals from now to the doomsday, but if you're not operating at a high enough level, then you're not going to achieve them. Then you're just blowing hot air. So yeah, a man needs to have standards that are sufficient to achieve those goals. And if he doesn't, then he's not going to achieve them.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with the whole goal setting thing is the ego trap, right? So the ego's going to say, "Oh, I got these great fucking big goals," but then his, an ego will self-protect itself by lowering standards and making the excuses so it doesn't get hurt. So it's that double-edged sword, the iron sharpening iron part, right? I think the results are a direct reflection to a man and his standards, because any man that achieves large results has some fucking crazy standards.
Doesn't it a chicken and egg? No. He's not going to get the goals unless he has high standards. But
he's not going to get the
probably not going to
results.
set high standards if he doesn't set some goals for himself.
That's not true at all. men bullshit themselves all the time. Oh, I'm gonna go out there and make $1 million this year and never achieve it, right? And quite frankly, if you look at a lot of the training, they always say to set these extremely high goals, right? It's always, aim for the stars and hope for the moon kind of thing, right? Because they know like men are just not, they're not going to perform unless they actually do step up to the, and do elevate their standards and then they hit that home run, right? But most men, aim for the stars and hope for the moon. That's what they're doing. And that's all ego talk. That's ego driven. That's not really standards driven. If men had elevated standards, you aim for the moon, you hit the moon. That's a high standard.
I think there's like the what part of being a part of a men's group in whatever capacity it operates in. It's a primary vehicle for, I'll speak personally, for me to elevate my character.
Right.
First and foremost, my own individual character. Discover, gaps and deficiencies, whatever it might be. My own bullshit. So it's about molding character. You said iron sharpening iron. I can only do that in a way where I'm around men.
Yeah.
At least in how I need to show up in the world, because the world demands more of a man. It demands more of a man, and it demands character development. And I think that got lost when most of men's arenas were, for lack of better terms, became an open door to anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
And that sort of fell apart. And I think men's characters slowly started getting softer. They became lower. Their impact on the world around them, whether it's families or whatnot, started to change. They were not showing up like men anymore. The why of it all is that, as a being with character, I got to fit into the world around me. There's an influence in social culture that I play, whether it's with other men, within my family units, within, my professional career, or how I am actually playing a part in my city, my neighborhood. Like that's a huge part. Like I want my neighbors to look at me as the man on the street, where if my kids are in trouble, go talk to that man. You don't know him very well, but he seems like a good man. Trust me, go to see him. If you're in trouble, you can count on him. And that part, I think the major benefit of why a men's circle is a necessity or an environment that is masculine is simply to help the character development of a man, such that he can start to fit into the world around him when he is off on his own in a more productive fashion. For me, I remember having a daughter, and then all of a sudden looking at who I was, and then how I was fitting into the world, and that shaped and shifted and changed my own self-image, and I started looking at my character, and it was very difficult to find a place to develop that character in a way where I could show up as a proper husband, father, brother, son. So that's what it's done for me is help with character development.
That's an interesting point, character development, and it's funny how increasingly it seems like women think that they can develop a man's character in their sons, which is so far from the truth. I don't know where this lie perpetuated from and when it started, but this movement of separating boys from fathers has been around for quite a long time, and it's getting, well, I don't know if it's still getting worse. We may have plateaued that part of the bell curve, and I think the pendulum's swinging the other way. But how many men are out there that just didn't grow up with fathers? But I mean like masculine fathers, right? A man that knows how to be a man, for the sake of showing his son how to be a man, how to teach his man how to enter the world. Like that, it's kind of gone.
Well, you have a 50% divorce rate, right? Number one. And of the 50% men who are still having a family, how many of them are masculine men? I know we all like to go back to the 60s and 70s when men were masculine, and 50 years later, the society is very different.
Very, very different. Yeah. But it's not even that. It's even the education system, right? Since the Second World War, we've been funneling kids out of being, getting that direct learning from a mentor into these halls of schools where, I think now mainstream education is starting to realize like this is not the way to educate boys, and you can see that from the graduates and who's graduating. It's all women, or mostly women now, as opposed to what it was, right? That mentorship isn't there anymore, and the whole market's starting to reflect it. Like I don't know if you've noticed, but in Canada, our GDP is 63% funded by our government, which is a very feminine type organization. Like this is not the way that men used to run things. It is the way we are now.
Well, let's come back to how we're having the conversation about this particular episode, which isn't to go on a rant about, you know, what's
Politics
being
and
done,
such.
what's being done in society and government and so forth. We're talking about a men's group. We're talking about why a men's group. We're talking about what is it that is in it for a man to be part of a men's group, and what has a men's group succeed. So talk about that.
Well, I'll say a little bit more about that, because like I product of a divorced family, no problem. I had great role models as a result. I had a masculine father and I have a masculine stepfather. However, they gave me good role model examples to live into, but they had to accept me. We're family. So it really didn't help me develop my masculine character. It gave me a role model to move towards, an example. It really, the being a part of a group of men in some form or shape allowed me to find a belonging amongst men, which they didn't have to accept. They don't have to accept at all. They're not my father. They're not my buddies in a lot of cases. They're not even my friends in a lot of cases. But the acceptance of being inside of a group of men and finding that really did a lot for the development of my character. And as a result of building those relationships, I go out into the world, or I'll call them bonds, not relationships, the bonds with those men. I'll go out into the world and it feels like I have all these people behind me that nobody else can see. Nobody else can see it. But to me, they're there all the time. Whether I'm facing a difficult circumstances, a challenging moment, or a confrontation, I sort of have that invisible army at my back of men that have accepted me. And I also have access to wisdom, knowledge as a result of it.
See, that's what I'm looking to hear, because men today, they're living in an environment where they're being crapped on for being a man. They're also living in an environment where distraction is huge with technology, cell phones, social media, text messaging, you name it, right? So for them to be able to break away from all that, they really need to see something that's given them a tangible benefit, right? And what you just talked about, Banks, that's a tangible benefit. Developing your character as a man, I think, is job one. How do I become a better man? How do I become the kind of man that I'm proud of, that I don't beat myself up in my private thoughts, you know, because that's what most men are doing today. They put on this fucking mask out in the world, like, I'm great, everything's great, look at me on social media, I'm amazing, I'm doing all this great stuff, I make $1 gazillion. And inside they're fucking hollow, you know, they're fucking hollow. Remember that movie back in the 90s, Hollow Man, with Kevin Bacon? These dudes are fucking hollow, man, right?
Yeah. And the best part is each one of them has that whole hollow presence, so they buy the other man's hollow presence.
Or go on and adopt somebody else's false,
Sure.
persona as a example of what they ought to be. I realize that being accepted for who I am along the way has grown me into a confident individual, no matter where I am. And it comes back to, you said hollow, right? So I hear lack of substance when I hear that.
Okay.
A man who develops character amongst men and has some status, he's got access to resources, knowledge base. I'd rather rely on a man than an AI system any day of the week.
Dude, we're the anti-AI in a way. Like, AI is fucking great, don't get me wrong, but remember, in our community, we were telling men to create their CPRs, or their context purpose results, for the tour. And then Arpa created a tool for men to do it. And they fucking outsourced everything to that goddamn tool. And that's not the purpose, because that's not a real CPR. That's just some bullshit, highfalutin, good sounding thing. Right? Cooper, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, what I was going to say is around this whole issue of character, around mentors. I look at my buddy group, and it's got, whether by design, the different levels of demographic in terms of age.
By design, given that you're the designer, Coop.
And I just see so much of how the younger men are getting the benefit from the older men, in terms of what I always like to refer to as life experience, and life experience is the best teacher. And so, in my work as a leader of a CFO group, we talk about peer experience. We don't like to give advice, and I see the same thing in the men's work. And so the men learn the best when another man can say, well, I've been there and here's how I handle it, good or bad. And I think that's where they learn the most. And as well as to Arpa's point about this whole mentoring process being lost, at least I think we are doing it by design or otherwise, of younger men who we are always encouraging. I wish I was a 25-year-old man knowing about men's groups and joining one at that stage of my life, rather than waiting until I did in my 60s. So, I think that's the biggest benefit that we bring. And as we go up in age, different men may have missed it. If a man is 40, but he didn't just join until he's 40, he missed, so to speak, that 25 to 40 mentoring period. So fine, now he gets it, and hopefully he can somewhat catch up to where his age is versus, what he should have learned when he was a 25-year-old man.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And I want to just come back to this point about a men's group in a sense being the anti-AI, because I think really I'm hearing from too many people that they want to just fucking give everything over to AI, including the ability to reason and think for themselves. And I think that's a huge problem. I know, Arpa, in your business, you're using a lot of AI, and I know that you're very keen on AI and high on AI. I use a fair amount of AI on my business. But let me finish. Let me finish.
Go ahead. Yeah.
But I don't think AI is advanced enough right now to take over from humanity basic functions like relating to others, like thinking for yourself, like deductive reasoning. And I think people that try to make it a replacement for those skills are fucked.
Well, I think it's a symptom. I think that technological advancement is a symptom of people who have lost touch with being able to rely on each other, specifically when men are not able to count on each other. And that's where I think the purpose behind, not just reason what it does for a man, but the purpose behind it is to create some social well-being by having strong masculine presence in the right places. I've seen men build the world and maintain that structure.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not doing it, and they can't count on one another, or they lack the capacity to know how to do it in terms of their own behavior or in the trust factor that they have with other men, those things quickly get eroded. They were foundations of our civilizations and the rise of every bit of progress that we've ever had. Every bit of progress that we've had has been founded off the bonds that men have created over generations. And the benefits have permeated everything, which has been fundamentally great for the advancement, of society in many different ways. Unfortunately, if we allow relationship or the interaction between people to die and separate it, it is going to harm us. So the purpose behind being a part of these is being able to fit into the world in a way and do the job that I'm built to do.
So I gotta say, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. But go ahead, Art.
I'll add in here. So the bond between men, like masculine men, the thing about men is action, right? So AI will not replace that. Never. It's not going to build roads. It's not going to discover something new technology or whatever the hell it is. And it's not going to do that. What it does do, and I find that it does it very well, is it replaces the administration staff, which is mostly run by women. It's a research aid. It is a fantastic research aid. And I use it for everything. I'm using it, shit, man, just before this call, I was researching how to up my marketing game online. And it's giving me so much, quick feedback. Something that I would have relied on my administrator for, who I have replaced with AI, and I don't regret doing it at all. It's faster, it's more reliable. You know what I mean? Like those are the positions that are in the biggest jeopardy. And it's funny. I was reading an article about how the feminization of our government has led, and the schooling system has led to all these hyper feminine positions in the workplace, and yet those are the ones that are going to are facing replacement by AI first. You know what I mean? Like who's going to need a Well, shit, I replaced my administrator. AI answers my phone, sets meetings, emails, all that. And as the days go by, it gets more intertwined. So like that's in my business. That's me, what I'm doing personally. I don't know what some of these other larger companies are doing. You know, I read one company had killed like 2,600 jobs in replacement of AI. So that's the stuff
Amazon
that's
killed
going
45,000 jobs,
45.
and it fucking ran into a buzzsaw because the AI took down the entire Amazon site for 48 hours. Wasn't up. One publisher I know has 300 authors on Amazon through their self-publishing arm.
Yep.
The entire catalog got taken down by the AI. I had AI take down all my Amazon accounts because it looked at me as a fraudster. They're making a lot of mistakes. So what I'm saying is that I think there's people that are rushing to AI without properly
Sure.
thinking and working it through. And then there's folks like you. You're a very methodical man. Whatever you do, you try it out. But inside our community, that AI tool you created was a neat tool, but I also don't like that the men used it. I think what that tool should have been made available to a man once he'd submitted his CPR as a way to kind of, evaluate it. Not as a fucking tool that would then, because that's how they used it to fucking create their goddamn CPR, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
on the topic of the AI thing, I mess around with it with some specific business cases. I will say this though, it's inclined to buy any piece of bullshit I put into it and sell it back to me.
Yep.
And make me feel really good about it. One thing that, and that doesn't matter if I would imagine would do the exact same thing if I was talking to it in a personal context. When I'm talking to a man, one who's been given the opportunity to see me and be around me, that man don't put up no bullshit. He will push back hard on me. I've instructed tools to do that. They do not sufficiently. They do not have the ability to stare at me, look at all the little things that go on when we're standing there face to face next to one another. Men can see me, and they pick up on small details, whether it's an inflection in tone, a slight body movement or haptic, and a man can catch that. So men are very, very good because men don't like to be lied to.
No,
they don't. So when it comes to being around men, I will trust the input when it comes to the personal development that I need to do on myself to grow my character, to change my behavior, to raise my standards, to actually get somewhere in life over any piece of technology. Yeah. There's just something that I believe a human being, and particularly a man, can do, is sense something. He knows. He's been trained for eons to do it. And to pass up that, or to not take advantage of it, I find is a big loss.
Yeah, I agree. The AI cannot sniff out bullshit. And I don't know who was it again that said like 80 or 90% of communication is nonverbal, right? Like how did AI won't pick up on that cue?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Above 90%.
It's the opposite. It's not the words, it's the emotions. Yeah. So that's exactly what AI won't pick up on it unless you're, particularly if you're just doing texting with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless,
100%.
Of course, you want to get into hyper facial body recognition software. But you know what? I'm sorry. I'm a man who also values privacy, both my own and a respect for another individuals. So it's not an application that should ever come into the mix of social well-being. I mean, how many times have we seen, even prior to AI technology, replacing real human interaction? It creates more hostility than it does connection.
I think someone should create, maybe I'll fucking take it on, an AI code of conduct and a code of ethics, because AI, as Arpa has demonstrated, can be a fucking awesome tool inside business, but it can be misused, and it can be used in a way to cripple a man's ability to function and think and solve problems. And what we want it to be is something that is an adjunct that helps supersize our problem-solving abilities, not something that causes them to atrophy.
Yeah, 100%.
I'd rather work with the tool when it's helping me get more intelligent than trying to take away my intelligence. The mere name of that in that sense, and this is where I don't want to spend too much time on AI, but when it comes to dealing with men, I know I'm dealing with not artificial, dealing with actual
men.
Actual intelligence, There's a capacity, and intelligence is beyond just logic and reason, which are very masculine functions. There is an emotional component to it. There is a physiological one. There's a spiritual component to it.
100%. 100%.
Let's remember something obvious, and Arpa touched on it. AI is just a tool, and it's all about how you use it. They're great for, if you think, here's the world of history and knowledge and everything else, and nobody, no matter even a voracious reader like Blue, can know it all. No. So you go and say, tell me about this, but then you got to do some thinking about what the hell to do with it. And I think that's the part where a lot of people fall down, is they just want AI to give them the answers instead of using it as an assistance to help them think better, or to get answers quicker, or have more data to come up with answers.
Friction, baby. When I have to think, when I am forced to actually have to comprehend and go through those nuances, that little frustration, that agitation that comes up in my, that's actually what's building. It's not a problem. It is the process of rewiring. That friction and trying to remove it from my life is not beneficial. And more often than not, I'm not getting that friction from AI. I get that from relationships or, interactions with other humans, particularly men, because let's face it, between the two genders, men aren't agreeable.
They're not.
Or at least if they are going to come to an agreement, all the details needed to be sorted out. They don't just arbitrarily make agreement. And that friction is what helps me evolve.
To say that men are not agreeable, I would think that's not entirely the truth, because men can agree to disagree and walk away and still be friends. Good luck finding women
but we're talking
agree
about,
to disagree.
like, from a personality point of view, men are more disagreeable than women. We're more open about being disagreeable. But the truth of that matter is, I think women are on the surface of it more agreeable, but behind that fucking surface, they can be absolutely fucking viciously disagreeable, in a way that men in general aren't. I'll just look, I love my woman. She's a great woman. All you men have met her. Getting her to go on a fucking trip is a nightmare for me. A nightmare. She's so disagreeable about the whole process. And, she smiles and I've been invited to have dinner in Las Vegas with my buddy Wayne Allen Root, right? Good man. We've done some work together. We've never met.
Oh, really?
Before, in person. So I'm going to Vegas. So I'm just going to get there a little early and have dinner with him in August. And I said, look, you should come so we can have dinner with him and his wife. And I think it's really great. And there's a lot of reasons she knows of Wayne. She likes Wayne. And man, it's just fuck. just like to me, it should be, yeah, okay, sure, book the trip. And it's not, it's definitely not. So, and if I lose my patience, it is not a good time. Like, she's going to get pissed, and there's going to be no sex for Baloo for a couple of weeks because of that,
So what would happen if you bought the airline ticket for her and just said, hey, it's booked, we're going?
Oh, I've done that before.
And
I'll go through weeks of hell.
Really?
Hell. Oh God.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, remember task number 2, be a good listener.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, I am listening. It's just, this is a good idea for both of us. It's a really good idea. It's a really, really good idea. At a personal level, at a soul level, at a business level, it's just a good idea. But like I said, I'm just more open about being disagreeable. She's more disagreeable with a beautiful smile on her disagreeableness.
Oh, Nikki.
Anyways,
that's funny.
Good. So, men, as we kind of wind down our conversation, I think we've had a good series of back and forths on what a men's group is, what is in it for a man to be in a men's group, what it takes to have that men's group give that man a lot of success, and Also, we have talked about the importance of a man maintaining his sovereignty and how he thinks and not outsourcing his sovereignty to AI, which is a nice bit of a sidebar conversation. As we're looking to wrap this up, I want to just get some final thoughts from every man. And let's start with Cooper.
Hold on. You asked an interesting question earlier, and I'm not sure we exactly tackled it entirely yet. That
Which
secret
one?
sauce stuff that makes it work. Like
I thought we did
that's-
tackle it, which is the secret sauce is always raising standards and making
That's
sure
one of them. But I think men need to have fun together. You know, they need to be
Very good.
engaged
Very
in
true.
meaningful, purposeful, solid directions where they're moving, you know, towards something that's greater than them. I mean, the standards help that, you know, that momentum build, but without having some fun, without having a direction, a vision, you know, for where they're going or the impacts that they're
Good point.
causing, I think that dimensionality is lost because
point.
the standards are, as you said, that bare minimum, right? But there's also like living towards a code of conduct, as you did touch on that, you know?
Yeah.
But then there's that spirit at which it's done in, you know? I think it's also about having people to compete with, like actually engage with, not against necessarily sometimes, but yes, but to compete with, to open up that part of the I guess you could call it that spirit that might be missing when a man's off on his own in the world. And to be honest, I don't know about you, but I have fun in lots of different forms, but I never have as much fun as when I'm hanging around men. I just don't know why. It's an actually good time. It's a different type of fun.
So, you know, I think
Do
that's
you
a
wanna
good
answer that
point
question?
that you're making, that having fun's important. And I also, it just made me think that I know there's a code of honor from the work that we've done, but I think sovereign men ought to have a code of conduct, right? And the first fucking thing about our code of conduct is have fun. The second thing about it is keep raising your standards, right? Because if a man is having fun in life, it's just going to make him want to participate more. Is the juice will be worth the squeeze. But a man's got to keep his eye on standards. So those are two aspects of a sovereign man code of conduct that I think are valuable.
Well, I think another part of that secret sauce is, you know, I wouldn't say getting rid of an ego that keeps an environment of men working together. It's knowing where and when and how to engage with the ego. That is a very important part to keeping some degree of harmony existence there where, yes, conflict can emerge, but in a productive sense.
Yeah,
It doesn't
it's like
lead us to our-
allowing it the appropriate space.
Absolutely. Like I've had some moments where, yeah, like, hey, it's actually gone to the place where, okay, I'm going to be physical with another person. Yeah, a little bit of fighting. But you know what? The man I fought with cared more about me in that moment. So even then, it was you know, his ability to exercise care and control his ego when mine was out of control.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to borrow this from the code of honor, but commitment before ego is a good way to encapsulate all that. Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Final
I'm gonna-
thoughts.
So my final thoughts as I'm listening to Banks, and it is one of our codes, is do your best. And when I think of the number of years that I've been involved in men's work and seen many men come and go, and the ones who left versus the ones who have stuck it out and elevated their game, that first of all is the essential, is giving it your best. But there's also something, and again, I see this in my CFO groups. Some people are made for this stuff, or they put their mind in the right place. They're open. And, you know, I told a quick story at the beginning, Blue, of how we met. And I was totally open to find out about this. And it may, again, come to this thing about ego, that we bring men in on a guest basis. And it becomes very painfully obvious within, you know, if they join and 2-3 meetings in, they're just not the right person. And they probably know it too. But I think it comes back to a fundamental. I am open to learning. I am open to, I know I want to do better. I am open to elevating my game. And at the end of the day, am I doing my best in that environment for me? First of all, I'm useless to anybody else if I'm not giving my best for what I can do. And then obviously expand it to those around me. And so I think that's one of the things that we endeavor. I mean, I'll tell you a quick point that I remember. One of the men, I think he was a guest, and he was just on guest night. And it was somebody I brought. And one of the things that really impressed him on that night was he said he could see how much the men on the call so much were, I know you don't like this word, Banks, but helpful, caring about another man and doing what they could to be of service to that man. And he was surprised in this environment to see that. And that was for him sort of the epiphany of what he would want to get out of this thing and why he was considering joining, because that really hit home for him.
Very good.
I think the care is being infused with support. And men don't support like women support. We empower, we embrace, we coach, challenge, and we're always action driven. You know what I'm saying? Because a man that grieves his father can't grieve forever. After he's given some time, he has to get back into action. Otherwise, he'll never get over the loss. And that's the truth, right? Like that's why support's for tits, bro. we don't do that. A man can take a few days and then he has to get moving again. Otherwise, he'll die in grief, and that's not right. But I think one of our code of conduct should be embrace your masculine. Embrace your masculine. A lot of men don't know how to, that it's okay to do that. Be the man. Be the man you're supposed to be. And if that means that you have to turn to another man and call him out in the most brutal and honest way for his benefit, then you should be doing that. That's your God-given obligation, to being in a circle with men. Tell them the ugly truth so the man can make changes and be in action to fix that. Be a better father, a better man in the world.
Amen.
Embrace your masculine.
Embrace your masculine. It's a good one. All right, Banks. Truth quickly, brother.
Yeah, I to be honest, I think being around men's circles over time and whatever arena that's been in has taught me that I am like virtually the same as 99% of other men. 99.9. As a matter of fact, the only small difference and variable there between the good and bad out there in the world is the ones that they surround themselves with. 99% of us are just the same, though. And when I started realizing that, it actually allowed me to realize I can have a bigger change on the world because I can relate with people, get together, and actually conquer something bigger than myself and my own, we'll call it bullshit goals, the nice to haves, all of that shit. It's given me more meaning for something that matters.
Yeah, this has been a great podcast panel. We ought to do this again a few times this year and talk about other topics that we want to get into. I think it's valuable for the four of us to come here and talk out loud and think out loud with one another, because it solidifies our thinking around how we want to serve the men inside the Sovereign Man community and in the world at large. So thanks for coming, man. It was really great to have you here.
Thanks for
A
having me.
pleasure.
Good times as always.
Absolutely. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.